Have you ever noticed how two businesses can sell almost the exact same product at almost the exact same price, yet one consistently attracts customers and the other struggles for attention? The difference isn't usually the product. It isn't the logo. It isn't even the marketing budget. More often than not, the difference is communication. Every interaction your customer has with you is telling them a story. Before they've read your headline or compared your prices, they've already started forming conclusions about you and your business. They've decided whether you look trustworthy, established, and premium. Those judgments happen in seconds, long before logic has a chance to catch up. That is what design really is. It's not decoration. It's not making things look nice. Design is a deliberate process of influencing how people think, feel, and behave through visual information. The problem is that most business owners never learn this. They see design as just another expense, or worse, they assume that because AI can generate an image in 30 seconds, the need for professional design has vanished. But generating an image was never the valuable part. Knowing what image should exist, who it's speaking to, and what emotion it should create, that is where the value lies. That is where the value has always been. This is a masterclass for business owners. My goal is to help you think about branding, marketing, and communication the same way professional designers think about it. Because contrary to what people believe, your job is not to become a designer. Your job is to understand what good design should accomplish. And that starts by correcting the biggest misconception in the industry. So what is design really? If I ask 10 business owners what is graphic design, most will probably say something like, it's making things look professional, it's making graphics, it's choosing colors, it's making logos. Now, none of these answers are completely wrong. They're just incomplete because they describe what designers produce, not what designers actually do. Let me give you this example. Two people walk into a hospital. One is a doctor and one is an interior designer. Both may look at the same waiting room. The interior designer will notice the colors, how the furniture is structured. He or she will look at the lighting, the layout. And if they're a good interior designer, they'll be looking at ways in which they can improve that space. But the doctor will be looking at a different problem. They'll probably be looking at the line of patients in that waiting room. Their concentration will be looking at some of the symptoms that some of these patients are presenting with. This is the same waiting room, yet two people are looking at it in a different angle. Same waiting room, yet these two people are solving for different problems. Design works pretty much the same way. The public sees colors, designers see communication problems. And that's the first mindset shift I want you to make. Design isn't about making things look attractive. It's about making ideas easier to understand. Every piece of design in your business exists to communicate a certain idea. Great design follows the exact same philosophy. Before a single line is drawn, before a single image is generated, before a single AI prompt is written, one question has to be answered. What business problem are we trying to solve? Because until that question is answered, we're not designing, we're decorating. And decoration has never built great businesses. Okay. So now that we understand that branding is all about shaping perception, let's talk about the language designers use to do it. Just as writers communicate using words and musicians communicate using sound, designers communicate using visual. The interesting thing is that your brain begins interpreting those visuals long before you consciously realize what's happening. Think about the Google search interface. It is incredibly simple and intuitive. Or consider the predictive text on your smartphone. The code required to anticipate your thinking and to correct your spellings in real time is staggeringly complex. It is a valiant and massive engineering effort. But to you, the user, it feels completely effortless. It just works. People don't even appreciate the complexity behind it. That is because it doesn't confuse them. That is the absolute pinnacle of design. Hiding the complexity so that the user never gets overwhelmed or confused. Great visual designs works almost in the same way. The easiest way is to stop thinking about design as art and instead think of it as directing someone's attention. Every designer is asking one question over and over again. Where should the customer look next? Everything else exists to answer that question. Let's imagine you're creating an advert. What's the most important thing? Is it the logo? Probably not. Is it the background texture? Definitely not. Usually, it's the offer, or maybe it's the product, or perhaps it's the headline. Whatever it is, your customer's eyes should arrive there first because you guided them there. It's very, very intentional. And that is the first design principle that I want you to understand, and it's called hierarchy. Basically, it's just deciding what deserves attention first. If everything is shouting, nothing is heard. I see this mistake all the time. Business owners want the logo bigger. They want the phone number bigger. They want the price to be bigger. They want the headline to be bigger. They want the QR code to be bigger. Everything becomes important. Eventually, you've created a design where nothing stands out because everything is competing for attention. Good design isn't about making everything bigger. bigger. It's about deciding what deserves to be the biggest. The same principle applies to another design principle called contrast. Now you might think contrast is just about black and white, yeah, because it's the opposites, but it's actually difference. And difference creates attention. For example, you put a bright button on a muted website, a website with dull colors, that is contrast. You put a big bold headline on small text, that is contrast. Or you put a premium product on a clean background, that is also contrast. Contrast tells the brain, look here, without contrast, information blends together. Your customer works harder, and whenever customers begin to work harder, they understand less and probably they'll scroll against your post or advertisement. Which brings me to one of my favorite topics, white space, or as many clients call it, empty space. I can't count how many times I've designed something only to hear, can we put something here? As if every square centimeter is paying rent. But here's the thing, white space isn't empty. It's actually very, very intentional. And for me, I usually use it on premium brands because the more space, the cleaner the design looks, the more air and the more space a design has, it communicates a premium feel. So if you're one of those business owners who are selling a premium product, this is something that should be in your design. It should have a lot of white space. You can look at many of the premium brands, looking at Hermes, looking at Gucci, looking at Apple, and even Samsung. If you look at their designs, they're not cluttered. They have a lot of white space. And even the way they lay out the shops have so much space, so much breathing room, creating that premium ambience. That premium ambience is intentional. It's a clear use of white space. So understand this. White space creates value. Many experienced designers understand that it's not about saying everything at once. It's about communicating the right thing as quickly as possible. For me personally, when I make a design, the thing that I would usually send to a client is probably not the first draft. First, I have to think if they're a premium brand. And for me, normally I work with premium brands. So after I have the whole design, I'll begin removing things and just remain with the bare bones that actually just communicates exactly what I want it to communicate. And that's the use of white space. To understand how powerful this is, we have to look at some of the most successful marketing campaigns in history. When you study the greats, you understand that design is never just decoration. A well-executed visual layout functions strictly as an advertisement conversion tool. Let's look at the legendary Volkswagen Beetle campaign in the early 1950s. At the time, every car manufacturer was designing ads in almost the same way. Massive, colorful illustrations. These would be giant illustrations of cars dominating almost the whole page, fighting for attention with huge, bold headlines with cluttered text. Every inch of the page was shouting. Volkswagen did the exact opposite. They used an ocean of white space. They placed a tiny black and white photo of a Beetle at just the corner of the page, and at the very bottom they put some text that says, think small. Now this is extreme contrast. Because of that extreme contrast, this was impossible to ignore. The white space acted as a spotlight, forcing the customer's eye exactly where the designer wanted it. First, to a tiny car, then secondly, to the headline. And since now their attention was captured, now they can read the whole copy down there. That single layout drove millions and millions in sales because the visual hierarchy was flawless. Or consider Apple's original iPod advertisements. This particular concept, Steve Jobs actually rejected it at first. But once it passed, this was a very, very interesting concept. They did not show close-up photos of circuit boards or screens. They used solid backgrounds, intensely bright colors, with a silhouette of a person dancing in the background. The only thing that was white in that whole background was the iPod and the earphones. That is the power of contrast. The bright colored background grabs your attention, but the extreme contrast of the bright cables against the black silhouette immediately tells your brain what the product actually is. It took a complex piece of technology and made it feel entirely effortless to understand. Both of these campaigns converted massive sales. For the exact same reason, they understand that great design is what you choose to show. In fact, the best in the world actually know the art of subtraction. They remove every unnecessary item until they are left with nothing but the core message. Look at the FedEx logo. If you ask an inexperienced designer to actually make you a logo, let's say for a global shipping company, they'll probably put a globe there, maybe some trucks, some airplanes, a lot of things going on in that logo, right? And you'll probably approve that. But the designers of the FedEx logo did the exact opposite. They removed all the literal artwork till they stripped it down to nothing but bold text. But if you look closely at the white space between the E and the X, it actually makes an arrow. They didn't need to draw a plane in order for you to understand that they move things. By removing all the visual clutter and relying entirely on precision and typography, as well as empty space, they created a design that communicates forward motion, speed, and accuracy. It proves the ultimate rule. The goal isn't to say everything. The goal is to communicate the right thing as quickly as possible. Another principle I wanted to share with you is alignment. Most people don't consciously notice alignment, but they immediately notice when it's missing. A design where elements are randomly placed, which is what AI is good at, if you don't prompt it properly, just feels unprofessional. Not because customers are measuring pixels, but because our brains naturally search for order. Alignment creates that order. It quietly tells the customer, this business pays attention to detail. The opposite also happens. Poor alignment suggests carelessness. It's not because the business is careless, but because perception is reality, especially in the customer's mind. Then we have reputation. Reputation means consistency in typography, consistency in colors, consistency in spacing, consistency in photography, consistency in icon styles. Every repeated decision strengthens recognition. Imagine if every chapter in a book used a different font, or every road sign in your city looked completely different. You'd spend more time figuring out the system than understanding the information. Consistency removes that friction. And finally, I want to share with you balance. Balance is also another design principle. It's not about making everything perfectly symmetrical. It's about making the design feel intentional. But the way I personally use it is that I try to balance things, especially in weight, on different sides of the design. Meaning that if maybe the imagery is concentrated to the right side, I'll try and add some elements in the left side so that there's a bit of a balance. If that balance is just not implemented, the customer's mind will just be looking at the design and something will just feel wrong. That's what I mean by being intentional. Think of furnishing a room. You don't randomly throw every piece of furniture into the corner. You distribute visual weight. That exact principle also applies to design. Every image, every headline, every button, every graphic carries weight. The job of a designer is to get all those elements and arrange them in such a way that they feel organized and not chaotic. I've shared with you all these principles that designers use to make designs, because I want you to understand that it's not just a child's play. It's not really just random. It's a skill that has been developed over years, and these are some of the things that are put into consideration to actually think about when you're doing the design. And that is why even if you use AI, you can never use AI better than a designer can use AI. Your outcome will be different than that designer. So these rules don't exist because designers love rules. They exist because they're rooted in how humans process information. Design principles aren't artistic opinions, they are observations about human behavior. Once you understand that, you stop judging creative work by your personal taste. You stop saying, I like it or I don't like it. You finally start seeing what the designer sees. Which brings us to a question that every business owner eventually faces. How do you actually work with designers? If you've made it this far, you've probably realized something. Design isn't nearly as subjective as most people think. There are principles, there are objectives, there are business outcomes. So the big question is, should you learn design yourself? My answer is not necessarily. Let's use another profession to explain this. Imagine you're building your dream home. Would it help you to understand architecture? Absolutely. Should you understand the difference between structural and non-structural walls? Definitely. Should you know what makes a good floor plan? Without a question. But does that mean that you should become the architect? Probably not. Your understanding allows you to ask better questions. It allows you to evaluate proposals. It allows you to avoid expensive mistakes. It doesn't mean you need to do the drafting yourself. The relationship between designers and business owners is almost like that. Your job is not to become better than the designer. Your goal is to become the better client. Because better clients produce better work. One of the biggest reasons why creative work fails isn't because the designer isn't skilled, but it's because the brief lacked clarity. Think about how many times you've heard something like, I need a flyer, or I need a logo, or I need a Facebook post. These aren't briefs. These are requests. A professional design brief answers 4 questions. Who are we talking to? And you should spend a lot of time on that. You need to really understand your customer. My hope is that you understand your customer better than the designer so that you can communicate that clearly. What problem are we solving? Like we've discussed earlier, design should solve a problem. So I hope there is a problem that you are solving. And what action should this design encourage? How will we know it worked? Everything else comes afterwards. The irony is, most business owners spend time commenting on colors, fonts, how the design looks, and things like that. But they rarely spend time explaining the customer. Yet, the customer is the only person whose opinion matters on that design. Most of them think the design should impress them. But the design is not supposed to impress them, it's supposed to impress the customer. And not just impress the customer, lead the customer to take a specific action that you want the customer to take. That's the whole purpose. One habit that I encourage you, especially as an elite business owner, is that you should separate preference from performance. There will be times when a designer presents an idea and it isn't what you expected. Your instinct might be to say, I don't like it. Instead, ask yourself a question. Is it likely to work better than I imagined? Those are very different conversations. Remember, you hired a designer because they bring expertise you don't have. So if every decision comes back to your personal taste, then what exactly are we doing? Understand that's not where the value lies. The value of a designer is in their thinking. This is why I also discourage vague feedback like make it pop, make it more energetic. It just needs something. Come on, what's that? Compare that to feedback like this. I think the headline does not stand out enough. I think that call to action is getting a bit lost. Or something like, this doesn't feel premium enough for a target audience. There, you're now speaking the language of objectives rather than opinions. And something interesting happens. The quality of the revisions improves dramatically because you've given the designer a problem to solve instead of a mystery to decode. At the end of the day, the relationship should be collaborative. You bring the business knowledge, they bring the communication expertise. When those two perspectives come together, the work almost always improves. So let's talk about the question everyone seems to be asking. Has AI replaced designers? The answer depends entirely on what you think design is and what designers actually do. If you think designers are just there to generate images, yes, AI has automated that part of the process. But if you understand everything we've discussed so far, you recognize something. The software was never the product. The thinking was. AI can generate hundreds and hundreds of concepts. It cannot tell you which concept communicates trust to a first-time customer. It cannot interview your audience. It cannot understand your positioning. It cannot decide whether your business should appear approachable or authoritative. These decisions belong to the people. That's why I don't see AI as competition. I see it as leverage. The best designers I know aren't afraid of AI. In fact, they're using it every day. Not because it replaces their expertise, but it amplifies it. Think about photography. Digital cameras didn't eliminate photographers. They eliminated film development. Photographers suddenly spent less time processing images and more time making creative decisions. AI is creating the same shift in design. Routine production becomes faster. Iteration becomes cheaper. Testing becomes easier. Because, let's be honest, neither you nor the designer know exactly what the customer is thinking. Neither you nor the designer know which design is going to perform best. Yes, you can use all those skills, you can use all those principles. You have to test out every design in the market. And what AI would do for you is that, yes, a designer creates a first brief. Now you can create different iterations of the same design to actually test out in the market, see what performs best. That's leverage right there. That's a real competitive advantage. That's why I encourage business owners to use AI. But use it appropriately. Use it to explore ideas, generate variations, create mood boards, write first drafts, accelerate repetitive work. Don't use it as a substitute for understanding communication, because AI is incredibly good at generating content, but it relies on you to determine what success is. In other words, AI is an incredible employee, but it's a bad CEO. It executes, it doesn't direct. And neither should you. Your role isn't to sit around and actually start prompting AI for 4 hours. Your role is just to define the objective, review the result, and approve the direction. That's leverage. Imagine what you could achieve if you use that time that you're busy prompting and things like that, left that skill to somebody who specialized in the skill, and then just focused on making 5 to 10 year plans for your business. All you're doing is just approving decisions. That saves you a lot of time, but if you're in the weeds designing with a designer, moving around, things like that, you're not using your high expensive time to produce proper leverage. Whether work is completed by a designer, an internal team, or a freelancer, or even AI, your responsibility becomes the exact same. Provide clarity, not labor. One of the biggest myths I've seen in marketing is that people tend to think that those businesses we know with a successful that brings in millions and millions of sales was just one successful design. That almost never happens. Every successful campaign that you've ever seen or even admired is really a result of dozens and dozens, sometimes hundreds of experiments. Different headlines, different images, different offers, different calls to action, different layouts. Marketing isn't about certainty. I talked about this idea earlier. It's about testing. Design should be viewed in that exact same way. Every advertisement or every design is simply just an hypothesis. You're making a prediction. I believe this message will resonate. The market will then give you feedback. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, and that's perfectly normal. The mistake many business owners make is becoming emotionally attached to creative work. Someone spends a week designing an advert, it performs poorly. Instead of replacing it, they defend it. Experienced marketers don't do that. They respect data more than ego. If something isn't working, change it. Keep the objective and replace the execution. This is where AI becomes incredibly valuable. Not because it creates better strategy, but because it increases testing velocity. What once took a week can now take an afternoon. The businesses that win the next decade won't necessarily have the best designers. They'll have better learning systems. They'll test faster, learn faster, adapt faster. That's a competitive advantage no software can create by itself. The higher you move in business, the less the value comes from execution. The more it comes from judgment. The CEO doesn't manufacture the product. The architect doesn't lay the bricks. The conductor doesn't play the instruments. The film director doesn't operate the camera. Their value comes from seeing the bigger picture. Business owners should think in the same way. Your company doesn't need another graphic designer. It already has one. Or it can hire one. What it needs is someone capable of defining the vision, someone capable of making good decisions, someone capable of protecting the brand, someone capable of making sure every piece of communication moves the company forward. That's your role. Not because you are the best designer, because you are the steward of your business. Everything we've discussed today, from psychology to branding, visual communication, briefing designers, or using AI, points to one conclusion. The businesses that win aren't the one with the fanciest software. They are the ones that think more clearly. Technology will continue to evolve. The tools will continue to change. These platforms will come and go. But businesses will always need to earn trust. They'll always need to communicate value. They'll always need to reduce uncertainty. They'll always need people capable of directing those efforts. So, if this masterclass has changed the way that you look at design, then it has done exactly what I hoped it would. If you'd like to go further, I've packaged a few templates, some software that you can use, some brand briefing templates. This will help you communicate your objectives before the project even starts. Also, some creative review frameworks that help you to review the work objectively instead of emotionally. If you like an experienced partner to help you implement everything that we've discussed here, I offer strategy as well as creative direction for businesses that want to build brands that are capable of standing out in competitive markets. We're talking about jumping into your business and actually giving the marketing department some direction that will actually bring results for your business. We're talking about overhauling all your social media. We're talking about tying the whole message across all platforms, from the website, the WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, everywhere that your business appears. The kind of ads that you should be running will make all that market research for you and actually compile it in one thing and help you implement it. That is one of the things that we're going to be implementing. So for that, link is in the description. You can reach out to me on WhatsApp and we can have a chat. Or if you want to skip all that, just click the link in the description and book that paid consultation so that we can discuss and actually implement all this. So everything else concerning my business, links are in the description. You can check them out. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.